Humans were never meant to be alone among the stars. That was what the galaxy believed. Other species were, born into large clans, shared minds, or bonded for life. Humans, however, were strange. They lived short lives, felt emotions too deeply, and still kept moving forward even after losing everything. Many alien races found humans uncomfortable to watch because humans did not hide their pain. They carried it openly, like a wound that never fully healed. Evan Hawley was one of those humans. He lived on a quiet orbital station far from Earth. The metal walls of his small apartment were clean but empty. No photos, no decorations. Just a bed, a table, and a single chair. Silence filled the space every night, pressing against him until sleep finally took mercy on him. He had not always been alone. The war had taken his brother. Time had taken his parents. Friends had drifted away to planets with warmer skies and louder lives. Evan stayed behind, working long shifts as a maintenance engineer, fixing machines that never thanked him. One night, after another long shift, Evan sat in front of his terminal and stared at the screen. Galactic Social Exchange Program, approved human access. The program was controversial. Humans could legally request alien companionship under strict rules. It was meant to reduce loneliness among frontier workers. Most aliens avoided humans, but some those without protection or status were offered through contracts. Evan hesitated. He did not want ownership. He did not want control. He just wanted someone to come home to. Someone to speak to. Someone who would exist in the same space and make the silence smaller. He read the catalog slowly. Healthy, adult alien female. No previous bond. No dependence. Clean record. That mattered to him. He did not want complications. He did not want pain, his or anyone else's. With shaking fingers, Evan approved the order. The wait took 3 weeks. When the transport notification arrived, Evan felt nervous in a way he had not felt in years. His apartment felt too small. His heart beat too fast. The delivery shuttle docked at the station early in the morning. Evan stood at the receiving bay as automated systems unlocked the cargo unit. The crate was larger than expected. That was the first wrong thing. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside stood an alien woman. She was tall, with pale blue skin that seemed almost fragile under the lights. Her silver eyes were wide, but controlled, holding back something heavy and old. She wore simple clothing, clearly reused and worn. Her hands trembled slightly, but she stood straight, like someone refusing to break. Then Evan noticed the second shape. A small alien child stood behind her, holding her hand tightly. The child's eyes were large and dark, filled with fear and confusion. His small body pressed against her leg as if the world itself might pull him away. Evan's breath caught. This was not what he ordered. The translator activated. "My name is Sally," the woman said softly. Her voice carried exhaustion and dignity at the same time. "I am a widow." Evan said nothing. His mind struggled to catch up. "This is my son," she continued, gently pulling the child closer. "His name is Tareen." The child looked at Evan, studying him carefully. Not with curiosity, but with the serious gaze of someone who had learned too early that strangers could be dangerous. Evan swallowed. "There's been a mistake," he said quietly. Sally lowered her eyes. "Yes," she replied. "There usually is." Her words were not angry. They were tired. Evan looked at the crate number, the shipping data, the contract ID flashing on his wrist screen. Everything was official. Everything was correct, except nothing felt right. "I didn't order a child," Evan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sally nodded slowly. "I know." Tareen tightened his grip on her hand. "Mother," the child asked softly through the translator, "are we being sent away again?" The question hit Evan like a blow. Again, Sally did not answer right away. She looked at Evan, her silver eyes filled with quiet fear. Evan felt something deep inside him shift. "I don't know," he finally said. But as he looked at the woman and her child standing alone in a cold receiving bay, Evan realized one simple truth. This delivery was not a mistake. It was a test, and everything in his life was about to change. Evan sat in his small apartment, staring at the screen that still showed the agency's message. He could not believe what had happened. He had expected an adult alien female, someone independent, clean, uncomplicated. But Sally and her child, they were a package he did not ask for. The agency had replied immediately after he reported the error. Their words were precise, cold, and unfeeling. Widowed units are discounted. Child included under survival clause. Refund unavailable. Evan felt his stomach twist. He had spent months saving for this, planning for simple companionship. Now the galaxy had sent him responsibility, grief, and a child who had already suffered too much. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. "This is not fair," he muttered. His voice sounded small in the empty room. Sally stood quietly in the corner, her child holding her sleeve. Her expression was calm, but Evan could see the sorrow etched in every line of her face. Her silver eyes reflected his frustration and fear, but not anger. She had learned something long ago. Anger did not change the universe. "My mate. He died in border service," she said finally, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Without bond protection, my son and I were reassigned to the first available household." Evan felt his chest tighten. Her words were simple, but the pain behind them was raw. Reassigned, a polite word for abandoned. A bureaucratic term for being tossed into a stranger's life without choice. Tareen, the little boy, looked up at Evan with wide, anxious eyes. "Mother, is this place safe?" Evan swallowed hard. He looked around his small, bare apartment, the walls cold metal, the single chair still empty, the silence louder than ever. Yet for some reason, he felt a strange warmth rise in his chest. "It's safe," he said, kneeling to meet Tareen's gaze. "I promise, I'll take care of you." Tareen nodded slowly, but did not let go of his mother's sleeve. Sally watched him quietly, a faint smile touching her lips. Her eyes glimmered with something Evan could not name. Respect, perhaps, or maybe hope. That night he stayed awake. He watched Sally sit up on the edge of the bed, her posture alert, ready to run at the first sign of danger. Tareen curled up against her leg, clinging for comfort, his small body trembling from fear. Evan did not move. He just watched. He realized that he was seeing a family who had survived impossible loss and still carried on. And now, in some strange twist of fate, that family was in his hands. By morning, he had made a decision. He opened the terminal again and typed a single message to the agency. Contract accepted. All clauses honored. He did not hesitate. He did not argue. He did not ask for a refund. Sully and Tareen were not mistakes. They were alive. And that was enough. When he turned off the terminal, he felt a weight lift from his chest. For the first time in years, he felt responsibility. A strange, terrifying, yet comforting sensation. He was no longer alone in the galaxy. He had a purpose beyond repairing machines or surviving in silence. Sally moved closer, still standing cautiously. "You understand. This changes everything," she said softly. "I do," Evan replied. "I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together." Tareen peeked from behind his mother, a shy smile forming. "You'll stay?" he asked. Evan said firmly, "I'll stay. I won't leave." It was a small promise, but in the emptiness of the station apartment, it felt like a seed planted in barren soil. It was fragile, uncertain, and completely human. Yet it carried hope. And sometimes, Evan thought, hope was enough to begin everything anew. For the first time, as Sally and Tareen watched him, Evan felt something he had not felt in years. He felt the stirrings of a home. Not built by walls or furniture, but by trust, care, and the quiet courage of those who refuse to give up on each other. And somehow he knew that whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at him next, he would face them, not as a solitary human lost in the stars, but as someone who now carried the weight and the light of a family. Living together was harder than Evan expected. His small apartment, once quiet and empty, was now filled with movement, sounds, and questions he had never anticipated. Tareen ran around, exploring every corner, touching walls, looking under tables, asking endless questions. Evan sometimes felt exhausted before breakfast even started. Sally was patient, but careful. She observed Evan and Tareen, adjusting slowly to their routines. She cooked meals that smelled strange to Evan at first, her alien herbs filling the small kitchen with scents that were sharp and sweet at the same time. When Evan hesitated at the first taste, she laughed softly, a delicate sound that reminded him that despite everything, life could still feel gentle. Evan tried to learn their ways. He studied Sally's habits, the small rituals of her species, how she folded her hands before eating, how she always checked Tareen's clothes and hair, how she hummed quietly when she thought no one was listening. He did not always understand, but he watched and learned. He realized that Sally's care for her son was quiet strength, not weakness. Tareen, however, had 1,000 questions about Evan himself. "Why do your eyes look so small?" he asked one afternoon, tilting his head. "Why do you bleed red when you are hurt? Why do you smile even when you feel sad?" Evan blinked. No one had ever asked him such direct questions. But he answered each one honestly, explaining the human way of living, feeling, and loving. Tareen listened, fascinated. And for the first time, Evan felt that his loneliness was slowly dissolving in the presence of someone who genuinely wanted to understand him. One night, a loud scream broke the small apartment's calm. Tareen had woken from a nightmare, tossing and turning in his sleep. He clutched his mother's sleeve, shaking violently. Sally froze, eyes wide with panic and sorrow, memories of her mate flooding back in unbearable waves. Without thinking, Evan acted. He gently picked Tareen up, holding him close to his chest, speaking softly in a low voice. He hummed a tune his mother had sung to him as a child, a song long forgotten, but somehow remembered in the heart. Tareen's breathing slowed. His tiny hands relaxed against Evan's shirt. The nightmare faded, and the child finally slept again. Sally watched from the doorway, her silver eyes shining with a mix of awe and quiet gratitude. "You calm fear," she whispered, almost to herself. "Like my mate once did." Evan shook his head, embarrassed. "I'm not replacing anyone," he said. "I know," Sally replied gently. "That is why it matters. You did not try to take his place. You simply offered safety." From that night on, Evan noticed small changes in Sally. She laughed more often, though quietly. She began to trust him with small decisions, like letting him choose Tareen's clothes or arranging the apartment to feel more like a home. Tareen followed Evan everywhere, often climbing onto his lap or holding his hand when he was afraid. Slowly, the apartment no longer felt empty. It felt alive. Evan learned to enjoy the little things. Tareen's questions at breakfast, Sally's soft humming, the way sunlight fell across the metal walls in the morning. Each day became a lesson in patience, understanding, and care. He realized that family was not something built by laws or contracts. It was built by choices, the choices to stay, to help, to comfort, and to love. Evenings became the most precious. All three would sit together, sharing stories of their pasts. Evan spoke of Earth, of his parents and brother, of his lonely childhood. Sally spoke of her mate, of her homeworld, of the dreams she once had for Tareen. Tareen, in his small, careful way, began to share his own fears and hopes. In those moments, Evan understood something profound. Life had thrown him an unexpected gift. Sally and Tareen were not a mistake. They were a chance to belong, to protect, and to love. And in return, They gave him trust, warmth, and a sense of purpose he had not known he could ever feel again. For the first time in years, Evan felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Not just in space, not just in a station apartment, but in the quiet, fragile, growing heart of a family that had survived loss and now together would survive everything the galaxy might throw at them. 3 months passed since Sally and Tarin arrived at Evan's apartment. Life had settled into a delicate rhythm. Evan woke early to fix the station's machinery. Sully prepared meals that smelled of alien herbs, and Tarin ran through the small corridors, laughing and exploring, slowly learning that he was safe. Evan had begun to feel a fragile peace. He thought, perhaps foolishly, that the galaxy would leave them alone. It did not. That one morning, the apartment doors hissed open. Uniformed officers from Galactic Enforcement entered, their movements precise, their expressions cold. They were here for one reason: the contract. Human Evan Hawley, the lead officer said, voice clipped and mechanical. You are in violation. Widowed units are subject to reassignment after bonding failure. Your unit is scheduled for retrieval. Evan froze. His heart thumped painfully. You can't do that, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. They're bonded. We're a family now. The officer's eyes flipped toward Sally and Tarin, as if they were mere objects, numbers in a ledger. Bonding does not matter for humans. You have no legal claim. Your household is in violation of interspecies assignment regulations. Sally stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but her words carried a weight Evan had not expected. My son will not survive another transfer. You do not understand what this child has been through. You cannot separate us again. The lead officer studied her carefully, then shifted his gaze to Evan. You are a human. You are weak. You will not stop this. Something inside Evan snapped. Weak. He had been alone, silent, small in the galaxy's eyes, but now he had Sally and Tarin in his care. They were not possessions. They were not cargo. They were alive. And he would not let them be taken. Then take me instead, Evan said, voice low but steady. Take me, do not touch them. The room went silent. The officers exchanged glances, unsure what to make of a human who dared defy them so openly. Humans were rarely bold. They were considered fragile, emotional, and incapable of standing firm against enforcement. But here was Evan, standing tall, chest forward, eyes fixed on the officers with unyielding determination. Sally's hand found Tarin's, squeezing it. She whispered, almost to herself, He chooses us. Even knowing the danger. The officers hesitated. In their calculations, a human should have fled, argued, or cried. But Evan did none of those things. He simply stood there, willing to bear any consequence rather than let this family be torn apart. Tarin's small hand squeezed Evan's. The child looked up at him with trust. That had been hard won over weeks of care. Evan felt the weight of that trust in his chest, pressing him forward, giving him courage he did not know he possessed. Release them, Evan said. Or take me. I won't let you hurt them. The lead officer finally spoke, voice softer than before. This is unprecedented. Humans rarely act like this. You risk everything for 2 units that do not belong to you. Evan did not flinch. They do belong to me. And I belong to them. That is enough. Sally felt tears prick at her eyes. She had lost so much before: her mate, her home, her sense of safety. Yet in this moment, standing beside Evan, she realized that hope was not gone. Perhaps she had been wrong to think humans were fragile. Perhaps they could be the strength she had been searching for all along. The officers left without another word, retreating to consult their superiors. But the threat had not vanished. Evan knew the galaxy would try again. Reassignment rules were strict. Regulations were relentless. And humans were considered weak. But now Evan understood something else. Strength was not measured by size, speed, or legal authority. Strength was measured by what you were willing to fight for. And Evan would fight for Saley and Tareen, no matter what came next. As the doors hissed closed behind the officers, Evan took Tareen in his arms. Saley rested her head against his shoulder. They stood there in the quiet apartment, holding each other tightly. For a moment, the world outside, the galaxy, the laws, the threats disappeared. And Evan made a silent vow. No one would ever take this family from him. Not the galaxy. Not the laws. Not even fear itself. Because for the first time, he had something worth fighting for. News of Evan's defiance spread faster than he expected. Within hours, the story reached the public channels of human colonies and stations across several sectors. Headlines flashed: Human protects, alien family against galactic enforcement, and widowed alien and child. Saved by human. Humans were not known for obedience when injustice struck. And this story struck deep. People write about a small, fragile human standing against cold, unfeeling regulations to protect a widowed alien mother and her child. Many felt pride. Many felt anger. Many felt hope. Evan watched as messages poured in from across the galaxy. Humans and some sympathetic aliens offered support. Volunteers came forward, lawyers willing to fight pro bono, advocacy groups sending aid, and station officials quietly refusing to cooperate with reassignment orders. Humans had a reputation for chaos and stubbornness, but they also had a reputation for loyalty, for caring even when it was inconvenient, for standing for what was right. Evan could hardly believe it. Messages flooded his terminal. You are not alone. We are watching. We will protect them with you. No family should be torn apart by law. Saley watched Evan reading the messages. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of disbelief and gratitude. Your people? They actually care, she whispered. I never believed humans would fight like this. Evan shook his head. We do when it matters. When someone is innocent and someone is hurting. We fight, even if the galaxy doesn't expect it. Tareen, sitting cross-legged on the floor, glanced up. So, people will help us? He asked. Yes, Evan said softly. People are helping us. You don't have to be afraid. The story spread to alien colonies as well. Some officials were embarrassed that a human species considered weak had shamed enforcement agencies by gathering public attention. Others were annoyed that regulations seemed powerless against emotional arguments and public outrage. Evan realized something vital during this time. Humans had a unique strength that no law or military could measure. They were unpredictable. They were persistent. They were willing to bend rules, break traditions, and risk themselves for family and friends. The galaxy had long underestimated them, but moments like this showed that humans could do the impossible. Saley's expression softened over the days. She began to laugh quietly with Tareen. She allowed Evan to read bedtime stories to her son. She started trusting him with small decisions, like choosing a meal or arranging a small corner of the apartment to feel more like a home. Evan noticed that people from faraway colonies had sent small gifts. A book in Tareen's native language, a tiny mechanical toy that moved with a soft hum, and even a small patch of earth soil to remind them that life could be nurtured anywhere. These gestures made their apartment warmer, softer, less like a station outpost and more like a home. Even when the threat of enforcement still lingered, Evan felt stronger. He realized the galaxy was not just full of cold regulations or indifferent officials. It was full of life, hearts, and courage. And sometimes, all it took was one human to remind the universe that care and family mattered more than law. One evening, as sunlight reflected off the station's metal walls, Tareen sat on Evan's lap, reading aloud from a small book. Sally smiled from the corner, watching the two of them. Evan felt the familiar ache of his old loneliness dissolve, replaced by warmth he had never thought possible. For the first time, he understood what humans really could do. They were late to the galaxy. They were small, fragile, emotional. But humans, when faced with love, loss, and injustice, would rise. They would gather strength from hope. They would act. And they would protect what mattered no matter the cost. And in that quiet apartment, filled with laughter, soft humming, and the smell of alien herbs, Evan knew one thing clearly. They were not alone. And they would survive. Together. Years passed. The quiet orbital apartment that once felt cold and empty had transformed into a home filled with laughter, warmth, and life. Tareen had grown tall and confident, his silver-blue skin glowing under the station lights. He walked with the pride of a child who had survived loss and learned love. He called Evan father in both their languages, a small word that carried mountains of trust, respect, and affection. Sally no longer slept sitting up, alert and fearful. Her laughter came freely, and she sometimes danced with Tareen around the small kitchen when the evening lights turned soft gold. Her silver eyes, once heavy with grief, now shone with hope and quiet joy. She had chosen, against every expectation, to stay with Evan, and in doing so, she had reclaimed a part of herself she thought was gone forever. Evan watched them one evening from the window. The stars stretched endlessly, indifferent and distant, yet here, in this small corner of the galaxy, he felt connected, alive, and unshakably strong. He remembered the day Sally and Tareen had arrived, the shock, the fear, the weight of responsibility, and he realized how far they had come together. He had learned something profound over the months and years. The galaxy could underestimate humans all it wanted. They could call them weak, emotional, and fragile. But humans had a strange kind of strength. It was not measured in fleets or weapons, but in choices, the simple, stubborn choices to care, to protect, and to love even when the odds were impossible. That was human strength, and it was unstoppable. Tareen ran to him, holding a small homemade model spaceship. "Father, look!" he shouted, eyes bright with pride. Evan smiled and knelt to take the ship, examining the tiny details carved with a child's careful hands. Sally joined them, her hand resting lightly on Evan's shoulder. The three of them shared a quiet laugh, the kind that built invisible walls against the coldness of space. Sometimes, when the station lights flickered softly against the metal walls, Evan would think of all the moments that had brought them here, the fear in Tareen's eyes, Sally's quiet pain, the threats from officers, and the human stubbornness that refused to bend in the face of injustice. He realized that the galaxy had tried to test him, to see if humans could truly stand for family. And they had passed, not because they were stronger than anyone else, but because they refused to surrender their hearts. Sally looked at Evan, her eyes full of unspoken gratitude. "We are lucky," she said softly. "I never thought life could give me something like this again." Evan shook his head gently. "No," he said, smiling. "We are not lucky. We chose each other. That is what matters." The three of them sat together as the stars moved silently outside the window. There were challenges ahead, of course. The galaxy was vast, rules were rigid, and danger was always nearby. But for the first time, Evan felt that nothing could touch the family they had built. Love and choice had created a bond stronger than any law, stronger than fear, stronger than loss itself. And in that small apartment, in the quiet warmth of a human heart joined with alien courage, Evan understood the truth. Humans were late to the galaxy. Humans were fragile, emotional, and underestimated. But when humans found something worth protecting, something worth fighting for, they held it together, they nurtured it, and they never let it go. Sally leaned her head on Evan's shoulder. Tareen's small hand rested on theirs. The galaxy could try to separate them, rewrite laws, or challenge their choices, but it could never erase what they had built, because family was not given by law. It was made by love, and that made them unstoppable.